Salam world, I'm shorter than average girl from down under, and this is our second character analysis, focusing today on the man of progress,
Pretty boy. The golden boy.
The Hextech Wonder Boy.
and the defender of the future.
Jayce.
One of our two lovers on the show, and if that doesn't make sense to you, then I'd recommend watching the parallelism video, which is up there right now. But yeah, Jayce, the human version of a golden retriever. Jayce is the character that I am the most similar to on the show, or at least I was. We've been through similar life events, circumstances, and I'm sorry to say, decisions. Those of you who have watched my reaction to the series, you know how I felt about Jayce.
What has gotten in his head? Jayce, what have you done? Oh my god. She's played you like a fiddle. Everything's going so wrong. Why do you keep falling for this stuff, Jayce? I do not like this. This is so messed up. Bruh, if Viktor saw you now, he'd be so disappointed. Please don't fall into the same trap you did in the previous season. I can't. What the hell? No! You're so selfish. So selfish, Jayce. What the hell? What are you doing? Jayce? Chill. You haven't even spoken to him yet. Why? Jayce, why? What the hell? What got into you? I'm so angry at Jayce right now. You can go die. Oh my god. I still don't know what's happening with this guy.
That's called projection. At the moment, I'm in like my Jayce season 2 episode 8 era. Sprinkle in a little season 1 episode 9 / season 2 episode 2 jinx in there. But you ain't here for my story, but Jayce's. Born to a lower noble house in Piltover, one event defined all of Jayce's dreams and ambitions, and he was able to work towards that with the support of numerous people. Jayce believes he's incredibly lucky for being able to chase his dreams and have others assisting him in breaking away from the socially expected role of
join the Talis hammer business?
He believes that these people would help him shape his dream into reality, and so trusts them with it. He tries to listen and follow their advice as well as please them or make them proud because he feels chosen by them and so feels the need to live up to that choice. But because they each have different visions for his dreams, their ideas clash, and Jayce is left to hold the weight and responsibility of finding the middle ground to satisfy them all. Until the pressure breaks him, only finding clarity when he returns to where it all started, the moment that defined it all. It's a story about appreciating your place in the world and finding meaning in gratitude. So, without further ado, let's talk Jayce's story. From episode 2, we can glean quite a bit about Jayce's past, or at least the major influences that shaped him to be who he is. The Talises are a lower rank noble family in Piltover who rose to status through their hammer work and the invention of the
Collapsible pocket wrench.
But we never see Jayce with his father, and the only photo we have indicates that Jayce had lost his father from a very young age. Again, we have no idea of the nature of this loss, but whatever it was, Jayce only has a positive image of his father, aspiring to be like him, working the hammer. That is until somehow Jayce and his mother Zemina get caught in a snowstorm, and Zemina couldn't continue on due to her contracting hypothermia. Hypothermia so bad that it took out 2 of her fingers permanently. Yikes. So Jayce calls out for anyone to help, and that's when his knight in shining armor comes. This mage rescues him and his mother from the storm. When I first watched this scene, I was under the impression that Jayce and Zemina were being teleported to another planet, but no. Whatever the mage does, it doesn't change Jayce and Zemina's location much. It just gets rid of the storm. So it could potentially be like a time skip. Look, it's just a theory, but the implications, if true... The first thing that Baby Jayce says after such an extraordinary experience is,
How?
to which the mage gives him how. This rune was the start of the paradigm shift in Jayce. What just happened was good. Really good. So cue Jayce's curiosity in magic. Now, just by looking at Jayce's childhood room, we can see the accumulation of his dream pre his entry into the academy. He loved stories and literature associated with magic. He knew about different runes that mages used, magic history, and even that some crystals possessed magical potential. And he was collecting them. Gosh, it's so cute that he still has his childhood room intact. Anyhow, he gets into the academy and is among the 3% that succeed. Impressive. And his talents are recognized both by the Dean of the Academy, Heimerdinger, and the Caramans, who end up funding his research. Look, I don't know what story Jayce stitched up for his research proposal to get the Caramans to be his patrons, let alone be so trusting that their daughter just casually hangs out with them. But damn, that proposal must have been fire. But on a more serious note, we know that there was a lack of transparency when it came to Jayce's research, and it's never stipulated whether this was intentional on Jayce's part, but I'm somewhat inclined to say that it wasn't. Because when Jayce does end up getting caught for illegal and dangerous equipment, he came out with the truth, whether it be to his mentor in the cell or to the council themselves. Not to mention him spilling everything to a child without him worrying that she's going to tell her parents about anything. But if we do say that Jayce didn't know or believe that he was acting shifty, then this actually reflects more on Piltover's governing body than it does on him. And overall, it's this same principle that Jayce continuously has disagreements with the council on. Piltover prides itself on being the land of progress.
We, the pioneers of science, we're the champions of discovery.
A narrative which it has sold to the world. It draws dreamers in so that they can have an impact, and it's also what others fear or seek to gain from Piltover. The council is an establishment meant to channel yet contain this level of progress. Make sure that nothing harmful or destructive comes about. Follow an ethos which is the foundation Piltover was made upon. Yet it is the council themselves that are continuously breaking the ethos for their own gain. Each council member is invested in progress for personal wealth, integrity, and status, to keep their house on the council. They need to keep their power and influence. Simple idealism and being a wet blanket on creativity won't make the cut. And even though some of these counselors are good people at heart, the politics of maintaining their seats leads them to make not so good actions. So when an ambitious, charming graduate who believes wholeheartedly in the narrative of progress that they had spun, of course they're going to endorse him. This was a model for their future political campaign. And look, he was a good investment at the end, becoming the poster child of the Piltover dream, and a huge cash cow for his investors. Jayce's idealism and naivety lands him in the same position over and over again throughout the show, and is a fundamental part of his story arc. So when the truth was exposed, all those Jayce believed were on his side betrayed him. To Jayce, Heimerdinger, the Caramans, and his mother's collaborative efforts to ensure that he wasn't banished appeared nothing less than them pulling the rug from underneath his dream. A dream he believed all three of them had endorsed. When it came to it, he was too idealistic. He believed that his mother would appreciate the value of his work, given that magic had saved her. He believed Heimerdinger encouraged out-of-the-box and creative ideas, so he'd support his. And that the Caramans liked helping the less fortunate, so they would help him help others. And even though all of these are true to an extent, these ideas aren't the top priority for them as they were for Jayce. So for his mother, saving him was more important than saving his dream. Hence the most insulting excuse that you could ever tell a creative.
My son, isn't in his right mind.
Like, I know she wanted to help, but I was mad for Jayce in this moment. Oh! For Heimerdinger and Cassandra, they sympathize with Jayce. The explosion wasn't his fault, but if he wasn't working with dangerous and unauthorized materials, it wouldn't have happened. The fact that neither of them were in the know, but were still his endorsers, actually reflected badly on them. So they needed to show some level of consequence or punishment, despite it being partially their fault too. To summarize, a lot of assumptions were made by everyone involved, which, when turned out to be misplaced, led to the dismantling of all of Jayce's work. Not the destruction of the dream, mind you, because a dream is in someone's head and so they can make it a reality in different ways, but it's still soul-crushing to have years of work thrown away due to a misunderstanding brought to life through an accident. And it's in a moment like this where you need the most support. But every adult in his life had just turned his back on him, either because they feared of losing him or their reputation. The only person who still believed in Jayce was Cait. And can I just say, one of the most underrated relationships on the show, as well as Echo and Vi. So, of course, we're 100% going to be talking about Jayce and Cait's relationship later on, but despite her rank, Cutie Cait can't help Jayce much. And in his despair, he makes a irreversible emotional decision.
Am I interrupting?
Hell yeah! The bloody legend! What Viktor does in this moment is quite genius. Instead of reminding Jayce or emphasizing what he was doing by saying, "Oh, don't do it," or speaking in an emotional or panicked tone, he just distracts Jayce from his own emotions and the negative spiral in his head, which really puts Jayce off, and as a consequence, saves his bloody life, despite him knowing exactly what was happening. Because he'd already picked up Jayce's band, which was next to Jayce's suicide note. He acts oblivious to the matter and speaks to him normally. Not like someone who needs help or sympathy, but as an equal, which is a super helpful and sympathetic way of dealing with a situation like this. When someone is in a low mental or energy state, they don't want to stay there, because the longer they do, they just keep going lower and lower and lower. So if you're someone who's listening or helping someone in a low, you need to set yourself up as a neutral. Because if you end up matching their low energy as well, either by being overly empathetic and showing too much emotion, or continuously bringing up anecdotes or examples of that same energy, then all you're doing is adding to the negativity and pushing that spiral further. But then on the other hand, if your energy is too high, then you'll appear out of touch and actually become a point of comparison for the speaker, who's just going to feel worse about themselves for not being where you are and feel really unsupported. So just psychologically, this was a banger. Great work for our anti-socialite. And it opens Jayce up. He's emotive about his Hextech dream, but highlights the betrayal he feels from those who he believed were supporting him, which is when Viktor shares his own anecdote with Jayce, the lack of a need for others to make a dream reality. But he doesn't mention this to preach to Jayce, which is something that a lot of us do. We share anecdotes hoping that others can glean a lesson or some kind of wisdom from them, which we can see Jayce initially thought that that was what Viktor was doing, and so he had the very normal response to it. But instead, Viktor uses the anecdote to highlight his experience before offering Jayce a proposal. He wants to see his vision through, and he's gonna help him do it without the council's approval. This wasn't some empty promise to revitalize Jayce so that he can start working on Hextech again, because as we said in Viktor's video, he needed this as much as Jayce did, so he came in with an offer. He would give Jayce his skills, his privilege, and his loyalty. For technically his whole life, but let's just stick to the 7 years for now, which is still huge compared to other loyalties on the show. Jayce couldn't believe that someone he didn't even know would offer so much to him. But the truth is, Viktor wasn't doing this for Jayce, but Jayce's dream. Viktor had read through Jayce's work,
Every page, I might add.
and wanted to save this idea from dying, hence saving its dreamer's life, and then offering all that he could to make it a reality. But of course, there are limits to Viktor's capabilities, particularly the money and campaigning part. So cue the assist.
Willing to risk exile for your endeavor. That's quite the conviction.
Now for Mel, this decision was purely for self-gain. But for Jayce, it was a chance, an opportunity to prove all those who had betrayed him that they were wrong. And with Viktor's intelligence and confidence, he was able to do so. Jayce couldn't believe his luck. After having lost everything a few hours ago, here he found 2 people willing to put their jobs and reputation on the line for him. And as an audience, we know that having Mel on your side was huge because she held all of Piltover's power. So whatever she endorsed was bound to be a greater success than any other project. And with Mel pushing hex tech, even Heimerdinger caved and became more lenient with his ethos. Not 100%, but enough to allow many changes to occur. Because as we start piecing things together, we find that Heimerdinger's biggest weakness is his curiosity.
I do love a good conundrum.
As long as there was a level of quality control, Heimerdinger was going to allow it, to Viktor's dismay. But anyways, this opportunity allows Jayce to repair all his broken trust. Heimerdinger continues to assist and endorse his and Viktor's work, the Caramans are back on board as his patrons, and his mother is fully supportive of his Hextech dream, knowing that it's no longer going to land her son in trouble. Viktor may have reignited Jayce's want to make Hextech a reality, but it was Mel who gave the project legitimacy in the eyes of the council, which made others believe in it once more. He was equally grateful to both. And as we know from Jayce's flashback, gratitude is a huge motivator for Jayce. So to keep what he had going, he just had to make sure all the parties involved in his project were satisfied, which was a lot easier said than done. His 3 supporters, which actually had a say on Hextech's direction, all had different visions for it, and beliefs leading their thoughts, which meant clashes. Clashes Jayce needed to deal with. And the reason why Jayce listened to all 3 rather than just picking one direction over the other was because Jayce had a dream, not a vision. Harnessing magic technologically was a broad idea, which could manifest in various ways. Viktor saw it as a means of giving everyone equal opportunity, making tools to bypass natural barriers to particular skills or jobs. Mel saw it as a means of fortifying Piltover's diplomatic strength on the world stage, using it for power and leverage. And Heimerdinger saw it as an opportunity to make Piltover more sustainable, offering new jobs, encouraging new initiatives, and inspiring future generations, all of which aligned with Jayce's dreams to harness magic and give others better lives, inspiration, security, and equal opportunity. So how was he meant to choose between them? And this was the big problem. Jayce had invented a power source with no real intended use for it. It was free reign for good or bad, which is what Heimerdinger was so afraid of. All Jayce knew was he wanted it to be used for good. So as long as the ideas presented to him, or the advice he gained, led to good results, he trusted his partner, collaborator, and mentor to lead him in this positive direction. He needed them to make his dream come true through their visions. And this need for them led him to develop relationships with each of them relative to their role in his dream. Jayce saw Heimerdinger's wisdom, respected his station, and was flattered by his pride in him. So he listened to his precautions, so long as they prevented damage or harm, not caused them. I also want to add here that Jayce himself shares this precautious nature with his mentor, but his lack of experience, and so wisdom, means that this caution can easily be misplaced and misused, leading to Jayce to make unwise decisions later on, like kicking Heimerdinger off the council, the blockade, building hex-tech weaponry, and vigilante justice. He's not as independent and daring as his other two partners, which was the first thing that he was drawn to in both of them. Jayce admires Viktor's will, persistence, and determination, and is in awe of his intelligence, progress, and work ethic. On the other hand, Jayce admires Mel's power, prowess, and earned respect, and he feels wanted by her. Jayce sees the value of Hextech through Viktor. It's literally saving his life, doing what he wanted Hextech to do. So Viktor was the dream in real life. I know that sounds like super corny, but it also explains why Jayce didn't see a problem with him combining Viktor with the Hex Core. Just like Viktor saw no contradiction in using Shimmer and keeping Jayce, Jayce saw no contradiction in using the Hex Core and saving Viktor's life. As for Mel,
Nothing feels impossible when I'm with you.
she was his strength and power, and given that she wanted something from him, it wasn't too much for him to ask a few favors of his own. I know that sounds really bad on paper, and it is as a foundation for a relationship, but they held a level of respect for one another. Irrespective of how the relationship started, they brought out good qualities in one another. Now, I'm the last person to ship Mel and Jayce, but I do like how respectful they were to one another and how their split was mutual and amicable, despite all the messy drama in between. Jayce's nature is to see good in people, thus not questioning Viktor's clear personal experimentation and forgiving Mel for clearly using him and Viktor for her own vices. Psychologically, naivety is a consequence of growing up without any significant life-shattering experience or trauma. But we also know that Jayce didn't exactly have an uneventful childhood. He lost his father and almost his mother as well. These events would have surely been enough to trigger something. And they did, but not what we may expect. We tend to associate troubled behavior with trauma, which could certainly be a case, particularly if a child feels alone or isolated as a consequence of an event. But when a person does get the emotional support that they need, particularly when it comes to dealing with traumatic events, it may lead to other things, such as attachment, the need for validation, and even hero syndrome. And we can see that Jayce falls into that second category, thanks to Zemia's great mothering and the mysterious mage who saved his and his mother's life. And just because something is psychological, it doesn't mean that it's a problem. Like, there isn't a problem with Jayce's attachment to his mother, his search for approval by everyone, or him wanting to be like the mage and give others magic. It's just who he has become, including his strength and his weakness. And where weakness comes in is his idealism. This trust that he has in other people's word as gospel and believing that everyone has good intentions. Like, outside the relationships that we've already talked about, we see how scared and hateful Jayce becomes just because of Marcus and Ambessa's words. And we see how quickly he takes the first offer when he's given it.
He paid in gold and didn't even haggle. I charged him double price.
All we ever wanted. The boy didn't even haggle.
Now, it's all well to understand Jayce's motives and isolation, but it's important to put them in the context of the plot and understand their consequences. Post the time skip, we see a more confident Jayce. Confident might be the wrong word here.
Oh no, this has gone into his head, hasn't it?
He is enjoying the success and the attention, but he wasn't in a fully power-drunk,
little egotistical.
state yet. He still valued the opinion of others and took responsibility for his mistakes, rather than throwing the rest of his collaborators under the bus. Jayce struggles to disconnect his decisions from his relationships, and the more power and responsibility he has, the greater the decisions weigh and impact on how these three see Jayce. Jayce tries to both split himself among them as well as make what he deems to be the decision with the best results. But as Viktor's representative, Mel's puppet, and Heimerdinger's prodigy, he was feeling the heat with the pressure of impressing all three. And if that wasn't enough to deal with,
The gemstone is gone, along with some of our research papers.
in attempts to protect Viktor, Heimerdinger, and Mel, he takes full and sole responsibility for this, which surprises all three of them. This moment, if you like, was off script, purely Jayce, aka a decision he made with no input from anyone else, which also meant he's taking control away from them. This leads to three different responses from them: betrayal and disappointment, puzzlement and surrender, and opportunity manipulation. Funny enough, Jayce's actual proposal mirrored Heimerdinger's belief: self-preservation before growth. And this could be because he was seeing flashbacks from the consequences of the previous break-in and not wanting to have a round 3 occurring. Which worked out really great for him. But yeah, just as they had 7 years prior, Viktor and Mel maintained their original position of needing Hextech to continue. The difference this time was the council's needs. Before, they feared magic and so voted against it, with the split vote being with regards to Jayce's banishment or expulsion. Now, Hextech was necessary for Piltover's survival, so they couldn't accept Jayce's safe proposal. And Owl Fox snatches the chance to reclaim the lost control from Jayce speaking up, and she plays her cards just right to gain more power by adding a new pawn on the council.
This girl's deuce!
Now, Jayce was initially opposed to this idea, but given that 2 of his 3 confidances believed that it was a good idea, well, he was kind of honored and proud that he had achieved this level of trust, not realizing that this was an entire political ruse to use him as a scapegoat for anything which may go wrong due to this event. Mel just really underestimated Jayce in this situation. So you gotta love it when
It's all going to...
you're getting the idea that I really don't like Mel. The only person who thought that this was a bad idea was Viktor.
And that House Talis be elevated to this...
This is a poor use of our time.
If Jayce was going to be more scarce than usual, he was going to have to pick up the slack and continue the work they started. Cause unlike Jayce, Viktor knows the Undercity. He knows things aren't good. So whilst Viktor was doing his solo work on behalf of him and Jayce, Mal slips into her black dress and gets to work on her investment. And you know Mel's scheming when she puts that black dress on. Under the guise of teaching him the tricks of the trade, she weaves in reminders of what happened 7 years ago.
The council assumes you'll fail. Time to prove them all wrong, once again.
And the dream that he has.
With us, you'd be investing in the future.
To motivate him to do her bidding, calm the storm that she had set upon the council. Because other than Heimerdinger, the council knew this was a Medarda power move. So strengthening the alliances between them was their chance to restore balance on the council. Mel couldn't have anyone turning on her or Jayce, so she showed him the dance, and once he'd learnt the steps, gave him the stage. Jayce was...
Better than expected.
And poor Jayce just went with it. Cause A, he felt overwhelmed with the responsibility thrust on him, and B, he still trusted her. But of course, she could see that this wasn't going to last. The pressure of politics would eventually break Jayce, so she needed to make it worth his while. Show him. I can't. Freaking hell. I hate this so much. Show him she's proud of him. You don't know how good it felt to see her wake up alone.
Yes!
Viktor getting terminally ill and his relationship with Mel getting physical complicates things even more for Jayce by basically increasing the stakes of those two relationships, which was why it was so much easier for Jayce to let go of Heimerdinger, foreshadowed by Heimerdinger's position in the performance. Viktor's illness added guilt on Jayce for not making him an equal priority and being able to repay his debt for him saving his life. And Mel's moves, well, Jayce thought they were genuine. Hence the courtesy of him apologizing for leaving her, and well, this face.
Oh, she doesn't share your feelings, mate.
Look, at least she got over her anger and showed some level of humanity. But yeah. On the other hand, nothing was added to Heimerdinger and Jayce's relationship. And when Heimerdinger actively called for the destruction of the Hex Core, Jayce saw that as harm to Viktor, the one line that he had given himself when acting on Heimerdinger's precautions. Sprinkle in the spice of Silco's planted evidence via Marcus, Jayce prepared to deliver the final blow.
And who holds you accountable?
Was it too much? Yes. But Jayce had too many thoughts and emotions, being pulled by three sides and feeling the need for
A more radical solution.
You taught him too well, I want you to insert the worst insult that you can give Mel, cause she frickin' deserves it.
With my deepest respect and appreciation, Professor.
The audacity! The nerve! Ah! So what did Jayce achieve from kicking Heimerdinger out? Well, he had learned that the only way of having power is by offering
Favors amongst friends.
But he couldn't offer Heimerdinger anything to save Viktor's life. And being pulled in three directions was too much. Two directions was a lot easier to handle. The state of the Undercity was just the icing on the cake for the narrative that he sold the council about Heimerdinger's inaction. A narrative which was laced with truth. And we know that Jayce didn't fully mean it, cause he tells us how he feels in the next scene.
He was my mentor, Mel. And I betrayed him. First, I have to save Viktor.
Just like Vi, Jayce lets out steam through physical exertion. Even though letting go of Heimerdinger would make future decisions of making Piltover better easier now that they were
No more red tape.
He felt guilty and ungrateful for making that choice. And as we said before, gratitude is a great driving force in Jayce. But up to this point, Mel and Viktor had been on the same page, at least from Jayce's perspective. They both wanted to further Hextech, expand the initiative, but the threat of the Undercity has now divided Viktor and Mel. And Jayce finds himself in the same position he was in with Heimerdinger, pulled in opposite directions. Viktor was from the Undercity, and cared more about their lives than the perceived threat to Piltover. Whatever means the Undercity was conjuring up was because of the huge inequality and discrepancy in the level of care that they were receiving from their government. Mel cared about maintaining power and the appearance of peace as to not have it impacting international relations. And having a deterrent, like, I don't know, the equivalent of a nuke program in this universe, was their way of silencing the Undercity's rebellion without having to use force, as well as having backup if the terrorists strike again.
That's me!
Oh, jinx. The thing is, Jayce actually cared about Piltover and the narrative of the dream, and he could see that neither Mel or Viktor cared about it as much as he did. So he decided he was going to solo this one once more, taking the parts of their advice which he deemed reasonable to make his own call, or flop, Look, I can't give Jayce 100% credit on this one. Because, like, seeing the consequences of the bridge fight had him on edge, and Mbessa's consoling words certainly did a number on him as well. Combine that with Cait's trust vis-a-vis Vi, and he thought he had a solid case. Plus, it gave him another way of letting off steam via physical exertion, until he was snapped out of it. The fact that this too was a fight on a bridge brought Jayce back memories of what had shocked him to start off with. So he realized how easy it was to be on the other side of this. The horror of his own actions makes him lash out at Vi, to which she reminds him the Undercity has always been this way.
Exactly the sort of thing we wanted to fix with Hextech. Improving lives, solving real issues, not just trade disputes.
And I personally think that what Vi said to Jayce reminded him of Viktor. And that's why he says,
You won't make it alone.
remembering Viktor's fight and Mel's words to him.
You should be with him, Jayce. We can't change what fate has in store for us, but we don't have to face it alone.
And I also think that's why the first thing that he does after getting to Piltover is go find Viktor, to which he arrives just in the nick of time before he lost him for good. This moment recalibrated things for Jayce, brought him back to that night 7 years ago. After he had lost everything, there were only 3 people in the world on his side. One person who believed in him, one person who agreed with him, and one person to endorse him. So, in Arcane fashion, this moment was going to be paralleled in the finale. Bring Jayce's Season 1 arc full circle. Now, before we get there, we have to talk about Jayce and Cait's relationship. They have this super cute brother-sister bond. Caitlin always believed and looked up to Jayce, and Jayce is protective over Cait. We see glimpses of their bonds throughout the show. They're fun with one another, teasing and playing, but when it comes to the really serious moments, they have complete trust and faith in one another. They see the real them on the inside, reminding each other of their core, but are also supportive of the hard times and respect each other's decisions. Jayce's decision to make peace with Silco and all the conditions of this agreement are a consequence of Caitlin's speech at the council. Give Zorn independence, free trade, and open access so they can progress and help themselves as an independent state. In return for the dismantling of Shimmer, the retrieval of the gemstone, and Zorn's known terrorist. If Jayce hadn't given Caitlin the opportunity to do her own private investigation, hidden her actions from Marcus, and listened to her findings, this deal would have never been struck. Behind the council's back, mind you. It was Caitlin's full-hearted belief in his righteousness which moved him in this direction. This unshakable belief in him from day one. But now, he had to face the council. But he knew he didn't have to do it alone this time. Viktor, who wanted equality for the Undercity, would surely agree with the proposal. And the fact that he showed up to the council room as his
Partner and a Zonite
suggests that he did, acting as the middleman to strengthen Jayce's position. But even by pulling Viktor into politics once again, Jayce holds on to the notion of protecting him, taking the brunt of the council's displeasure and accusations, leaving us with one more person, Mel. That face. She knew in that moment that the pupil had just become the master, and that unlike the first time that they were in this position, she can't use the situation for her Medarda power moves. Her decision was going to be a human one. No fox, no wolf, just...
I support Councillor Talis's proposal for peace.
Jayce had it all. He'd made things right for Viktor. He'd avoided war for Mel. Our trio was back. But this is Arcane, so... Holy mackerel. Now, I am sure Jayce would have felt immense guilt for this moment, because just like the event that had started it all, it was his personal work and illegal activity with the Undercity, which had put the pieces together in place for Jinx/Powder to accidentally create a disaster out of her need to prove herself. God, the parallels are so good! And for those of you who are wondering what the hell I'm talking about, this was an emergency meeting that Jayce had called. Jinx didn't aim at the council because she was trying to kill them, but because she was doing Silco's bidding to prove the Undercity's strength to Piltover by destroying the symbol of their power. She had no idea people were going to be there, cause people shouldn't have been there on a normal night. Ah, good lord, it's so much to take in. So for Jayce, the same moment where he gained everything, he lost it all. He lost his proposal, he lost his patron and his friends, and also his partner. Almost. He couldn't afford to lose his partner. So he was going to do everything in his power to save Viktor. This would be the third time that Viktor's life was on the line, and he was adamant not to be distracted like he was once before, and to do right by him. And look, Jayce tries his best, but he'd been away from the lab for so long that he had a lot to catch up on, plus all the new stuff that was happening to Viktor. So yeah, it took a toll on him. Speaking of tolls, now, even though Jayce mostly took responsibility for his actions, being
The golden boy.
meant that he got away with a lot of things with just
Slap on the wrist.
the consequences of his actions always manifested as mental tolls from his clashing morality. But here is someone that gives two hoots about Jayce's morality. Rennie wanted blood.
For my son.
Oh snap. Now, I wouldn't say that this particular attack had much of a bearing on Jayce's decisions, but they did on Cait. And as a consequence of his relationship with her, Cait's changed views, as well as his guilt, grief, and the sense of hopelessness. He just listened to what she had to say and built her
A hex technically team?
The lyrics for Heavy as the Crown apply for Jayce as much as they do for Cait. Both thought the best, tried to make peace, but war was instigated, and peace was no longer an option. At least that was the POV. This idea of having a small team of immense power rather than a full-scale invasion seemed like the most civilized solution. The intentions were the same as the treaty, but now it was by force, because Zorn had proved that it can't agree to the terms, so nor were they. Don't get me started on Ambassa! But yeah, Jayce made the decision there and then to disengage from politics. Or at least try to. The breaking point that Mel had predicted had now been reached. Tough. But thank God, another tie severed and Jayce finally had one direction. Save Viktor. And well, come next episode, he's done it. But things don't go Jayce's way. As we spoke about in Viktor's analysis, his content with his fate came about him trusting Jayce with his legacy.
We have to make it right.
Viktor wanted freedom more than he wanted life, a sentiment shared by most people living in the Undercity.
It's not enough to give people what they need to survive. You have to give them what they need to live.
Hardship, injustice, and inequality made it so that sacrifice for the sake of giving another a better life was worth more than surviving in their current existence. However, for Topside, where they were living this Piltover dream, life was the most valuable thing. So, while Jayce thought he was doing the right thing by saving Viktor's life and by assisting the Pilty Avengers, Viktor saw this as the highest level level of betrayal of his trust and legacy, leaving him with no choice but to make things right on his own. Ever since episode 4, Viktor knew that he and Jayce were working on different goals, but the goals shared one dream, and he had hoped that one day Jayce will come back.
It was affection that held us together.
This scene is so heartbreaking because neither of them were in the wrong. They just had different principles, and Jayce makes this clear.
You think it's so easy? To turn your back while your whole city looks to you for salvation? To cling to principles while your best friend bleeds out in your arms? I never asked for this!
His goal was life. Whether it be to take up the mantle of villain or hero, to save it, or forego principle. The decisions he made were difficult, but he felt like he had no choice but to make them. Bro, I am so grateful that Echo and Heimerdinger crashed the party, because I can only imagine the spiral that Jayce was going into post this breakup. But yeah, season 2 is nowhere as kind to Jayce as season 1 was. He has to deal with all the consequences of his actions, alone. Starting off with Hextech itself. Now, we're introduced to two concepts with regards to the nature of the Arcane and its interaction with life. The first is that
They think. They adapt.
the second is that when the veil between our world and the Arcane is thin, markings occur as an involuntary response to the Arcane's overuse, not as a fault of the user, but a property of the Arcane to maintain balance. Combine the concepts of balance and equilibrium with adaptation, evolution, and learning, and you actually get a real physical concept. As I mentioned in the Viktor video, I do want to talk about my theory for what the anomaly is in a future video, but just as a summary, I think that it's a creative way of showing stochastic theory in this particular world and the consequential butterfly effect. But basically, there would have been no way for Jayce or Viktor to know about the anomaly until it manifests itself, which is why it came as a shock and a surprise to both Jayce and Viktor when they first learned about it. Leaving that aside though, the anomaly itself has this property which breaks down the laws of nature, assuming that it's due to its constant creation and destruction, but again, nerd alert here, as a consequence. It breaks down space-time, which sends Heimerdinger and Echo to the alternate timeline. But when it came to Jayce,
The anomaly behaved differently around him.
but it wasn't actually the Arcane. Someone was tampering with it.
What? No.
So yeah, basically, Viktor brought Jayce to a future where the glorious evolution takes full swing. And once there, Viktor leads him, quite ominously, I must add, to the top of the Hex Gate where his body was. But Jayce trips, falls into an X-fissure, has his leg smashed by his mercury hammer, goes unconscious, develops an infection, and starts having hallucinations and delirium. Just a series of unfortunate events.
Look away, look away, look away, look away.
But in all seriousness, this time, however long it was, allows Jayce to reflect on his life, his priorities, mistakes, values, and relationships. And this whole shebang gives him a more fearless, single-minded, and deterministic approach to what he was going to do next.
And now, Jayce needed to make Viktor's journey, traveling from the deepest crevices of the Undercity to the topmost point of Piltover, all with a broken leg. This symbolic journey allows Jayce to understand Viktor's true struggle, understand why his choices drove them apart. But for now, Jayce needed to understand what went wrong with Hextech,
the side quest that he'd started with Echo and Heimerdinger. He just didn't realize that it was all connected, which is something we'll expand on in the love and relationship video. Like Viktor, Jayce realizes that this future is not the one they envisioned when they came up with Hextech. But unlike previous times where Jayce stands up and takes full responsibility for his mistakes, Viktor claims responsibility for this one, absolving Jayce from guilt and blame and clears his conscience. Because he values Jayce. The first time that Viktor had saved Jayce's life, it was because he valued his idea, his dream. Now, things have reversed. And as a consequence of this, he saves every Jayce's life, restarting the cycle because Jayce was valuable. Jayce had been the only one who actually cared about Viktor, believed in Viktor, and tried to keep him alive. He was loved. And in that moment, everything clicks for Jayce too. His whole life, he searched for magic to get closer to his hero, replicate that moment for others, because he was grateful. Grateful to someone unknown. So naturally, when we humans can't give back an act of kindness, we pay it forward. But now, he knew who it was. This one person who had given him everything. Hextech was no longer necessary for his self-fulfillment. Saving Viktor from this fate was. And this was the only thing that Viktor had ever asked of Jayce, manifesting itself in different forms at different times of their relationship. And this is the crux of the JayVik Arc, an infinite loop of gratitude, admiration, and appreciation. But current Viktor was in a completely different place post.
Goodbye, Jayce.
So back to the plot. There were two practical steps to change Viktor's lonely fate. The first is to stop
The process.
by bringing Viktor into contact with the anomaly so that he can also interact with space-time. Because one thing we learn about Viktor is that he doesn't listen to anyone. He makes his own choices based on their rationality and alliance to his mission. So only Viktor can stop Viktor. The second was to accelerate the glorious evolution so that less people are impacted and hence lost. I won't talk about the latter because it'll feature in the free will and predestination video, but for the first one, Viktor gives Jayce the Mercury hammer from this timeline, which has an anomaly instead of a gemstone as its power source. And this was necessary for the contact to bring Viktor into this interaction with space-time. But Jayce doesn't get the memo, and so he uses the Mercury hammer like a frickin' hammer. Luckily, Echo and Heimerdinger had created another anomaly, which Echo smashes into Viktor's face to wake him up. But look, I can't fully blame Jayce either, cause timelines can mess you up, bruh. Like, going back to the past means multiple future selves in that one body, all with their own different agencies and choices. Hence the multi-vision, glitching, flashbacks of the future that we see him go through in episodes 5, 6, and 8. They become less glitchy the further into the one path he makes it, because more Jayces had diverged from the path that he was on. You get the picture. It's a terrifying situation to be in. But he does the best with what he has. I stand corrected. With everything that I've just said, it's so hard to forgive Jayce for this. Like, logically, okay, fine. But emotionally... After the chaos he had unknowingly unleashed, the first thing that he does is check on Caitlin. Look, at this point, Jayce thinks he's done the job. Freed Viktor from this awful fate, as well as set him free with a positive legacy that was instantly destroyed the moment you killed him. So, I guess he takes the time to reminisce. More accurately, figure out how the explosion did such a number on Viktor but left him unscathed. And there walks in his answer.
Jayce?
Now, Jayce was very valid with his frustration with Mel, having now realized how toxic the power dynamic was.
You used me and Viktor for hex tech. You called us investments.
Anyways, here comes the troll of the century. Viktor ain't dead. And Jayce realizes he just caused that future instead of stopping it. Despite the fear and doom that he must have felt coming face to face with one of these, I mean, we're shown Viktor's nice perspective of the situation when Jayce is seeing this. So he does stay pretty collected. Despite knowing the future, Jayce doesn't know how the glorious evolution works, only its origin and location, Viktor and the hex gates. So his lack of understanding of the process would make it difficult for him to know how to stop it. He was trying everything he can, smashing Salo, shooting Viktor in the commune, and now preventing him from reaching the hex gates. Stopping things was his only wish, but a wish wasn't a plan. Jayce's #1 problem strikes again. This three-way duel demonstrates our trio's lack of understanding of one another. Each had gone through a journey of transformation and coalesced in here for different reasons. Viktor came to plea, but when rejected, feels sorrow and abandonment. Plus, the presence of two unknown arcane entities in the form of the Anomaly in Jayce's hammer and Mel's magic sparks his curiosity. Wrong time, mate. For Jayce, he came for answers and resolution, only to find himself confronted with his own failures, fear, and unable to achieve his promise, which is basically bloodbound to him. And Mel came to find solidarity and information. We'll talk more about Mel in her own video, but as someone grappling with a new identity and power, this battle was both confronting and confusing. And for all the resentment that Jayce felt towards Mel in this particular moment for how she had played him, his nurturing nature couldn't help but to find compassion for her and extend a hand of solidarity. Bless him! Jayce finally had clarity about himself and was going to enact his own vision. Having lived both Mel's and Viktor's lives, he could finally pick one path, and he had picked Viktor. But then...
Quiet! Forgive me, but we don't have much time. A storm is coming. The likes of which Piltover, perhaps Runeterra itself, has never faced.
Look, I get that he has to warn everyone about Ambessa's plan, because she's a smart-ass warlord. And also, Viktor had gone out of his way to come and warn them about it, right? So it makes sense that they would prep for a war against Ambessa. And just Ambessa, mind you. Now, this isn't me defending my boy, but Viktor doesn't promise Ambessa anything. In her desire for power, she misunderstands him and agrees to terms that actually provide her no benefit. Ambessa's desperate, so she makes these flimsy alliances to get what she wants, not realizing that these alliances were with foxes, using her and each other for their own goals. We've talked about Viktor and Singed relationship in the previous Arcane analysis video, and we'll talk more about Ambessa in future. But in summary, Ambessa is going to use the only method that she knows to get Viktor to the Hex Gate, so that he could give her this immortal army so that she can go and fight the Black Rose. Viktor can't actually give her that, but he's not going to tell her because he wants to get to the Hex Gates to make the glorious evolution happen. If Jayce wasn't going to help him, he had no other means to get there but this. Now, Jayce and Mel both know Ambessa's warring ways. She's 100% a threat to Piltover, but Jayce also knows that Viktor doesn't want the glorious evolution because if he goes through with it, he loses everything. The current Viktor doesn't know this yet, so he has to stop him for his own good. This automatically puts them on opposite sides, even though Jayce is working for Viktor. The war, in totality, was simply a defense against Ambessa, but also a hype machine for the citizens of Piltover to resist the temptation of the glorious evolution if it comes to fruition, for them to want to continue to have control over their lives, regardless of the consequences. Or, if they don't have that will, they can choose to leave, get away from the radius of the evolution before it gets them. Now, if none of this makes any sense to you, hopefully the Viktor video, as well as the future free will versus predestination video, can shed some context to this. But at the end, Jayce knew that he'd need to face Viktor, tell him the truth, or at least get himself to the top of the Hex Gate with his Mercury hammer for another returning Jayce to succeed where he couldn't. And to be honest, that would have been the case if it weren't for the Z drive. And so, Jayce finally manages to keep his promise to his best friend, his brother, and his partner, as well as repaying the gratitude to the one person who had given him the world. The end. I love this story. It's just so wholesome and beautiful. I'm obsessed with Jayce and Viktor. The only tragedy at the end of all of this is poor Zemina losing both her husband and her son. Look, I hope this long analysis helps you hate Jayce less and see that he's just a well-rounded guy who's trying to do the right thing and make people happy and safe at the expense of his own health and well-being. It's all well and good to see the best in people, but without self-assurance, confidence, and wisdom to stand behind it, that good nature will be manipulated to others' vices. And only you will end up reaping the consequences of that misplaced trust. So as equally as Jayce's tale is one of love and sacrifice, it's also a cautionary tale on idealism. Our next Arcane analysis will feature the Medardas. But before then, we're going to have a non-Arcane movie analysis. So hope to see you there. Make sure to use a tick or cross emoji to let me know if you're JB or JB not in the comments. Be brave, be happy, and be kind, and we'll catch you all next time.